Okay, so good afternoon, everybody. A very warm welcome to all of you to the Dale Carnegie Expert Forum. I know a couple of people are still on their way and joining us, but I think we will start and most of us are here. First and foremost, let me say a big thank you. Deeply appreciate your support, your enthusiasm, your participation, your being here, and especially to all of you who've come from Mumbai and Delhi. I know it's a long way, and everybody has busy schedules, so I'm deeply grateful for your presence here. This is the third edition of the Dale Carnegie Expert Forum in India. We started 2 years ago in Delhi. We held our first event, and then we did one in Mumbai last year, and this year we are, of course, doing this here in Bangalore. The whole idea, and for some of you have been participating in all the three forum meetings, and some of you are joining us for the first time. So let me tell you a little bit about what this initiative is all about. And I think somebody was asking me that over lunch. And I said, don't take my introduction away. I will tell you when I start talking. Is really, you know, when we were thinking about this about 2-3 years ago, and we said we need to have a platform for people like yourselves who are experts in your fields. And that's why the name, the Expert Forum. So this is really dedicated to people like yourselves who have the expertise, the experience, and who are every day in their workplaces actually pushing boundaries in HR, because you have to think out of the box most of the time. And how can we create a common platform for senior HR professionals to have a peer-to-peer level interaction and possibly discuss contemporary issues in HR that impact organizations today and possibly plan for organizations of the future. And that's why this is really, you know, something that we try to put together. So every time we decide to take a theme, an issue that we get to hear about from our interactions with HR people around the world, and then we deep dive into it, we do some research, and we think that we'd like to share some of that with you. But it's really an open dialogue. And feel free to, you know, ask questions, add value, share insights, best practices, and, you know, have an honest discussion, really, even share challenges that confront us. Because I think it's really a sharing platform, and that's really what we want everybody to get the value from. That said, today, as you know, the theme is about employee engagement. 2 years ago, when we did the Delhi Forum, we talked about cross-cultural leadership, and we came from a place where Dale Carnegie has presence in 91 countries. Every day our teams are talking to HR people around the world, and we know what their everyday problems are. And we thought this might be a very interesting thing, especially because you know, we work with global companies who leverage our presence across the network, and let's understand what employees in different workplaces look for in their leaders, and do those leaders know how to, you know, respond to that? Or when we have all of us as HR managers are today managing global workforces, do we know what different cultures are expecting, employees from different cultures are expecting? So that is a very rich discussion. It was so rich that we were actually able to come out of with a white paper just with the dialogue that happened around the table. And that alone led us into workplace cultures. And therefore, last year we did a whole discussion around workplace cultures. And that was very insightful. What we try to do is bring the global perspective. As you can see from the panel here, we have people from virtually every continent that we try to do, every region at least. And so I will introduce the panel, and then we'll move into employee engagement, because workplace culture actually led us to employee engagement last time. And there were people who were of the belief that it's old hat. Okay, much has been said and done, and maybe not enough has actually happened. And why not? I mean, employee engagement has been around. If you really think about it, the very first mention of the term employee engagement happened way back in 1990, right, with Robert. I just took the name of our trainer, Robert Kahn, who actually wrote an article he was doing a psychological research, and he wanted to, find out what engages and disengages people at work. So that was the first time the term employee engagement came about. And of course, his conclusion at that point in time was that it's the individual and contextual sources of meaningfulness, safety, and availability that impact engagement, and something that we all talk about even today. But I think since then, employee engagement seems to have become the holy grail for HR professionals. And I'm deliberately calling it the holy grail because it's something that all of us are pursuing, but may or may not be getting there. And there are companies today who are possibly getting on to the employee engagement bandwagon. There are companies who've declared victory and talk about how their employees are going over and beyond and putting in discretionary effort. And there are companies who suggest that employee engagement is dead because the needle hasn't moved at all as per research over the last so many years. So we thought, why don't we do a deep dive in to find out really what works and what it doesn't? Because the reality is that sometime in 2012, the Engage for Success group in UK actually was funded by the Prime Minister of UK to find out what really does employee engagement mean. And they're the ones who for the first time actually made the business case for employee engagement. And they obviously linked it, proved a direct linkage between engagement and performance and profitability and retention, all such parameters. So now HR professionals had something tangible to actually do with engagement than all this nice feel-good that everybody instinctively and intuitively understood but didn't really know what to do with, despite all the Gallup surveys and all of that. So there's a lot of measurement, there's a whole industry spawned on employee engagement, but let's see really what's happening or not happening, and for that we have a little bit of a research to share with you as what's working and what is not. But let me get back to my panel and introduce everybody. To my extreme right is Andreas Siflin. I know many of you have already met him over lunch. Andreas has been with Dale Carnegie for 16 years or so, and he's been a trainer. Today he's a Carnegie master, and yesterday he was telling me this is the 26th country he's visiting. He's been training people in 25 countries, including countries like China, which is not exactly the language that people talk in. So very interesting to, I've heard this so often from Dale Carnegie trainers that they train in a country that they don't understand the language and they get the same results. So that's quite fascinating. So that's Andreas. And to my extreme right here is Sanjay Jha. Many of you actually may
extreme
recognize.
Left.
Sorry, extreme left. Otherwise, very much my right-hand partner, but to my extreme left is Sanjay, familiar face to many of you on the Idiot Box in the evenings, but he has a day job, and interestingly in the field of HR. So he's part of our fraternity for all the sinful diversions that he has in the evening. But Sanjay, you want to say a couple of words? And
No, nothing much. I think politicians are, let me tell you, very good at employee engagement. That's all we do. I mean, somebody asked me, and I used to be in marketing before, and I told him, when you launch your product, whether it's a chocolate or a mobike or a apparel or a credit card, you define it by a certain income class, gender, city, metropolitan, rural, whatever. But in politics, everyone is your consumer. Everyone. You walk down a street, and no matter whether the person is sitting in a Mercedes or she is just kind of moving around with a cart, somebody's on a bicycle, somebody's out there just asking for money. And I think, one of the most understated and often cynically dismissed class is politicians. But my experience of having been on both HR and the other side is the fact that there is a lot of stuff that happens there that frankly is a revelation. I'll give you one example. When I was in the corporate world, I would maybe casually break a traffic signal. While walking into an airport security, try and be smart enough to get into the queue a little early. Ever since I've come in public life, I haven't broken a single signal, even if I'm driving at midnight. I don't do that. Okay, and no matter what happens, it makes you so humble. It makes you so humble, genuinely, not the pretense that you put up, that it actually helps you evolve. So, but it's great. I honestly believe that there'll be a lot to share, and I've promised Pallavi that I'll be very disruptive. And she always tells me whenever you come for these forums, I get into trepidation, not knowing what you're going to say. But I do believe that we should talk some stuff, frankly. Something about him, our man from Germany, his team got knocked out in the World Cup at the qualifying rounds,
Right.
but he himself is a fantastic goalkeeper. Yeah, and has played at a fairly advanced level for Germany. Yeah, I wish you were there in Russia.
Well, thanks, Sanjay. And of course, we have a very interesting representation from China with Gerard Hay. He's the CEO of Taiwan and also the chairman of Shanghai and Jiangsu and Zhejiang, okay, provinces of China. And he actually has been, he heads simply the largest operation of Dale Carnegie. And he's been at #1 position for how many years? 30 years now?
Yeah,
Almost.
25.
Yeah, 25 years on top. And all of us really want to do what he is able to do. And one of their great achievements is really being able to work with the youth in Taiwan. I think there's not a single. Is there anybody who's not a Dale Carnegie graduate in Taiwan at all? I think for a country that size, it's amazing how many people get trained in Dale Carnegie. So very, very impressive track record, and he's both obviously a business owner and he does training himself. So great to have you, and very interested in having the Chinese perspective. So here you have Germany from Europe and China from APAC. And we have, of course, Dan Heffernan, who's our Chief Sales Officer of Dale Carnegie and Associates. He absolutely decides the top strategy for our global network. Dan has been instrumental in actually the digital foray for Dale Carnegie and has been helping us integrate technology in our training very well. And for the last 3 years, he's actually brought in a huge shift in the way we service our customers by leveraging our global network. We're actually able to work with companies to offer a consistent, high-quality experience by working with them together. And I think companies like Continental and Dell are possibly, organizations we work with at multi-country levels. So that's really been a very large contribution from Dan, apart from the fact that he's had an India stint as well 10 years ago. So he's somebody who's very experienced, somebody who's meeting customers every day in different countries and has a very, very deep perspective on our side of the business. So Dan, very nice that all of you came to India, and appreciate your presence. And Dan's going to lead the conversation today, so I'll hand it over to him.
Okay. How's this? Hear me?
Yeah.
Great. Well, thank you, Pallavi. And welcome, everyone. I'm honored to be here with you and really looking forward to a dialogue today. This won't be a presentation, although we are going to present our research and give everyone an opportunity to react to that research and to have a dialogue around that research. So that's the goal today, is for us to really leave here with more awareness of what's going on in engagement, and perhaps even learn from each other, what are some paths forward we can take. So we're going to start with some introductions, and this is going to be challenging because our objective is to get around the room in 30 minutes, right?
Yeah.
Or less.
That's right.
And so here's what we're thinking. I'll start with a little bit more about myself, and then we'll go around the room. I think we'll start, why don't we start over here, and then we'll work our way around. So again, I'm Dan Heffernan, and a few words about my India stint.
Yeah.
It's great to be back here. I truly haven't been back here in 10 years. In fact, I realized my 10-year visa ran out, and they don't grant those anymore, so I got a different kind of visa to come in. I was head of e-learning, the e-learning business for a company called Element K that was bought out by NIIT. So my parent company and our board of was NIT out of Delhi. And so I spent a lot of time in Delhi, and then we had a team of developers in Chennai. So I also spent a lot of time in Chennai. So both the north and south, but I actually had never been here before, so it was, it's great to be here. I could tell as the plane was coming down that it was clearer here. There wasn't as much, smog. It was clear. It was beautiful. I could see everything. A little rain going on. So it's a pleasure to be here today, and I have many friends in India from my time here 10 years ago, and I'm truly happy to be back. What we'll do is we'll say, briefly mention your name, your role, and then in a sentence or less, if you could, what has been your experience with engagement so far? Has it been a great experience? Has it been a challenging experience? Maybe one word to a sentence. And you're going to note that throughout this entire research today, there are going to be lots of times where you're going to be able to expound on that. And we're going to not only ask for your input on a slide or two, we're going to regularly ask for your input. And we're excited to hear from you today. So again, your name, your role, and in a word to a sentence, what's been your experience with engagement so far?
Why don't we start?
Start here. Okay, we'll start to the right then.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am equally pleased to be here, to be part of Dale Carnegie Network. My name is Raj Kamal. I head Human Resources for Axis Bank. Pallavi and I have known each other for many, many, many years. And I was just thinking, can I put a timeline to how my definition of engagement also has changed over so many years? So I've had to bust many myths that I've held dear. And maybe simplistically, today I'm, given the age of social media, for me discretionary effort is out there, but I think what I am seeking from employees is advocacy. And the nuance that I have taken for employee engagement is how can I create advocates out of people? And for them to be advocates, obviously there has to be purposeful journeys that they have to live in the organization. But perhaps it's also important for them to have enriching, meaningful experiences with their frame of references, which is their peers, subordinates, and definitely the supervisors. Because the belief is that in this day and age, most of the organizations tend to be platforms for people to come and thrive. So really we can't, from an external source, try to engage people because the motivation is internal. So I'm saying for me, advocacy is the new currency of engagement.
Terrific.
Hi everyone, my name is Ajay Venkatesh. I work with Ernst & Young in the People Advisory Services practice, which is the HR consulting practice of EY. My experience with engagement has been quite mixed bag. How should I put it? So I would say that there is the truth and there is truth. The truth and truth. So being a consultant gives you the access to speak to multiple parts of the organization. A lot of times, a lot of truth actually comes out from that. And what comes out in the paper in terms of the EE scores sometimes is just the truth, not truth. So that's why engagement has been a little disoriented for me, because there are multiple models that we have. We're trying to do multiple things. A lot of it from an organization standpoint, I'm a consultant, so from an organization standpoint stands as, we want to show something to whoever and showcase something. But from an employee standpoint, when I actually speak and hear what employees say, I don't yet see that happening in terms of, is this my organization I really want to be? Like my house, my family, my people. Do I see that happening? Probably the day I do, I think employee engagement will be successful for me.
Thank you.
I'm H.N. Srinivas. I've worked with Tatas for about 30 years, out of which 27 years has been in one company, that is Taj Hotels. I was heading the HR function for Taj Hotels for 7 years when I retired in 2014, and since then I'm still with Tatas in the capacity of a consultant and an advisor, initially with Tata Sons and now I'm with Tata Trust. Well, it was an intensely service-focused company, Taj Hotels, and the challenge for us in an increasingly competitive market was how do you get the 78% of the employees who are in touch with customers day in and day out, 24/7, thinking on their feet, delivering a wide variety of service, and while doing so, create the differentiation and give a strong enough reason for the customers to do business with you and consciously reject competition offerings. How do you generate that kind of voluntary commitment, because they're outside the purview of supervision. It's a distributed service delivery company. They're in different locations and not being supervised. And he should, every time interact with the customer, should delight him. Customer should say, wow, this is fantastic, only Taj can do. So this was a challenge for us, how to get there. We implemented a number of programs and projects thoughtfully, and I think, moved the needle. We reached somewhere. We were the recipients of Gallup Great Workplace Award, Global Great Workplace Award, 4 years in succession. And the journey goes on. I think when we take up more discussion and engagement, some of those ideas I can bring forth, and thank you.
Hello everyone, I'm Varghese. I'm from AIG Analytics. I'm not part of the HR team. I'm part of the operations. I head operations for AIG Analytics. But I'm involved in employee engagement. 90% of our workforce are millennials, and it's very difficult to keep them engaged. So we need to keep thinking of different things, different activities. They get bored soon, and they want everything instantly. So it's a challenge, but it's interesting. Yeah, I'd like to hear from you all.
Thank you. You'll note, by the way, that it takes about 10 seconds for your mics to warm up. So you can probably, probably warm up your mic so that we can hear your intro clearly when you start. Thank you.
Okay, hi, I'm Amrita Madaya with Adobe. I lead talent development for Adobe in India. The way I'd explain my experience with employee engagement, I think, is like walking a tightrope between what's good for business and what's good for people. And then it makes it harder when you describe your people as your biggest asset, because then you start to worry about now what's good for business. So I think that's what I'd say, and I think it's also, like you said, the challenge of, busting myths that have been around for a long time. How do you not do something for the sake of doing, which is usually the hardest decision to make, and what to drop and what to keep. So yeah, it's a tightrope.
Thank you.
Yeah, hi. Vivek from Kotak. I take care of the corporate HR piece. Interestingly, for me, the engagement journey has been very different over the last, I've been with Kotak for the last 10 years. And I'll bring the perspective of the client. And the way we are seeing the clients behaving with the employees is very, very brutal. It is very cutthroat. It is very direct. You give this and you get this account if you don't do this. So the level of engagement that we are experiencing with the clients today is at a very different level than what we had at an earlier point. And hence, when the employee comes back to the organization and deals with us, the engagement that he's expecting is again very, very dry and cut and dry. So this is the challenge that I am experiencing in the organization. The environment is becoming hostile. And then in this situation, how do you engage with your employees? Obviously, in the investment banking area, if you look at very young kids having got a lot of things at the early stage of their life, having very different needs. If you ask them what is your purpose, they'll come back and say very, very different things in terms of when those purpose keeps on, evolving as they keep on achieving one after the other. So defining what is the purpose within the organization framework becomes a huge challenge, and how do you engage with them? I'll give you a context from a pharma industry, and I've seen this research people. Once they start persuading a patent, for example, they don't need anything else. They are fully engaged. The job is rich. They know what they are doing. They persuade that they will not leave, irrespective of the money, irrespective of the environment, irrespective of the boss. But in a financial space, unfortunately, you do not file for patents. You would have not heard about that. So how do you deal with that situation? So that is a challenge.
Thank you.
Hello everyone, I am Kiran Stephen. I take care of leadership development for continental India. My experience with engagement across various companies. Before I talk about experience, I'm using the word itself, engagement, is quite confusing, is misused, and forget the experience. With these 2 points, the experiences also has been varied. So during the discussions, definitely we will ponder upon with the expert forum as to what, from a meaning of engagement to an experience, how it translates. And that's what I want to look at. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Hello, everybody. I'm Harshita Mankad-Varghese. I work as a senior trainer with Dale Carnegie. My experience with engagement has been twofold. My 19 years of career helped me to understand this from an employee perspective. And every time I was able to see possibilities in my role, which was supported, I felt engaged. And as an HR, every time I was able to engage with our employees at a cerebral level and supporting, the thought processes that came out as an outcome, engagement was visible. And in one line, engagement is all about creating that bond, and it is the salt in the recipe that we're really looking at. We do everything, but we don't have the right engagement, nothing really works.
Carnegie, India. I'm based out of Delhi. Interestingly, we deal with a lot of organizations. It's day in, day out dealing with HR heads, CHROs, and what comes out is that everyone feels the need of employee engagement and say that it's very complex. But the bottom fact is, when you talk to business leaders, they say employee engagement needs to be a strategy now. It needs to have a very, very focused approach, because if you have happy employees, it's definitely going to impact your bottom line. And interestingly, a lot of data is actually going to come out from the survey that we did. It's good to be here.
Good afternoon, everyone. Myself, Madhu Vasudevan. I'm a sales manager again with Dale Carnegie, India, and I'm based out of Bangalore. For me, because as Manu was telling, we speak so much about engagement with our clients. It's like an everyday situation that we are trying to work with clients. So I think from organization standpoint, what they look at doing is trying to get the best performance out of every resource that they have and create an environment where they are able to express themselves to the 100%. So engagement for me would really be, if you have say 10 people or 10 lakh people, are they able to express themselves to the maximum that they can? For me, an environment like that is called engaged. And all organizations would be striving to reach there. Yep.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Ruben DeMello, and I'm a senior HR business partner with SAP Labs. For me, engagement, I think, has evolved from a point of the organization dictating it in a form of one size fits all to the current context of 5 or maybe even more generations in the workforce, really becoming an economy of one. It's about me, myself, and me again. And over there, I think it is the role of two broad entities, stakeholders. One is leadership, and when I'm talking about leadership, it's the first line leadership, because truly I've seen and experienced that 80% of the organization is actually influenced by 20% of those people called managers, the first line manager. So I think it's critical for the managers to be able to understand what is it that it means to this particular individual. And the second is, I think, the broader culture, the organization structure in being able to create those mass customizable options for people to really experience their career as this is specially designed for me. Thank you.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I think it's good to be here. I think, so let me introduce, I'm Abhishek. I head the HR for Huawei Technologies in India. And maybe by the name you guess, we are largely into high-end technology stuff, R&D. Mine is a core R&D organization with some services, of course. So the kind of people that we deal with is, they are really sorted out most of the times in their life. So how do we engage them? So that's the thing. And so over the years, what I have realized in my career is, I think engagement is really now, it's no longer about engagement programs, and the very fact that most of us in the organizations run an engagement program because we have already missed the bus. So I think what I increasingly feel is engagement is one, if the person can associate himself or herself with the company, and which is his everyday experience. So I think it's more individualized now. That's what people are expecting. The kind of people that we work with, they have enough job offers on hand. Everybody is willing to pay a lot of money. So money, job role, it's already given. So what is left for me is how can I make his everyday experience good at my organization. So that's one. And I think as HR, I think my view is that we're still in a catch-up mode. We react when there is a data point. Can we be ahead of the curve? If not every time, maybe sometimes. So I think those are two questions I'm still trying to find answers to. And that's where it is.
Hi, my name is Aditya Rao. I lead the People and Leadership vertical in Siemens Healthineers India. So I have been in 3 roles. Started with sales, there's a business side of things, eventually moved into facilitation, like what Harshita does, and then now in the HR. I think as being on the other side of things, I feel we, as HR fraternity, sometimes I feel we lack the understanding of engagement, because from an employee perspective, engagement is completely different. You know, as I think many of them spoke about, it's individualized, and I firmly believe it is, because when I was on the business side of things, I've been both engaged and disengaged, and the reasons probably would be very difficult for an HR to perhaps understand. And so I think, for me, I think the word around engagement is around the empathy of the immediate person who is responsible for that employee. I think that plays a significant role, and I think that's where I'm excited to see what the engagement survey says, because what do employees speak about it? You know, who interacts with them on a day-to-day basis? How do their customers treat the employees? I think all these are the factors that leads to engagement. And so I'm excited to be here, and thank you.
Thanks. Hi, my name is Adil Bandukwala. I work with a technology company called Belong. We work with technology majors, helping them hire people in quick time. My experience or my research often with engagement has been that it's often content and context. And while people say content is king, I've often figured that context is King Kong. So from that perspective, I often wonder if personalization truly has to be scaled when it comes to learning, when it comes to engagement. Because like you just said, you used to generalize engagement before. But I think today every single person wants to be felt empowered and enabled. Therefore, I often wonder, how can we personalize engagement right down to the wire to every single individual? Can technology help us do that? And how can humans and technology come together to make this happen? But super excited, Pallavi, thank you for inviting me here. Very excited to learn what Dale Carnegie has to reveal, and hopefully we can take back and use a lot of that in our organizations. Thank you.
Sadil. Hi, I'm Ritu Rakra. I work with Dell. Been with Dell for the last 15 years. At Dell, we do take engagement very seriously. In fact, we have an annual survey where we consciously track ENPS on a year-on-year basis. And if you look at the ENPS that we are currently running at an organization-wide level, we're at a 50 plus. And the best in class in industry is about 35 plus, right? We also have a clear research which shows that people with the best ENPS scores, or leaders with the best ENPS scores, and team members with the best ENPS scores have the best customer NPS scores, right? So there's clearly a business reason to drive engagement. That being said, it is not an easy task. I mean, if you look at it, we have, somebody said 5 generations in the workforce, we at least have 4. Our population is about 75% millennials. We have various businesses, and I mean, everything that Dell does globally, we have based here in Bangalore, right from your contact centers to high-end research. So in that situation, what is that HR can do to drive engagement? It's clearly not one size fits all. it's clearly not something we can deliver on our own. I mean, I think we've got to make every leader accountable to drive that engagement because it has to be personalized. So that's my view, and thanks for inviting me here, Pallavi. I think this is a fabulous forum, and look forward to the discussion.
Hi everyone. I'm Rajeshwar. I head HR for Mahindra & Mahindra Limited, which is the business part of it, which is automotive, tractors and the agriculture sectors. Through my career, I think we have seen from satisfaction to engagement, it's been a journey. And we used to be told in our early days that satisfaction is more temporary and engagement is more permanent. I think that's going to get challenged very, very severely in this VUCA world. I'd just like to place 4 dimensions. The one is, of course, this thing about more sustainable engagement. How can it be made more sustainable, or is it going to be like a ECG graph? You know, the like mood swings, and so that certainly is going to be challenge. I think this whole concept has brought back to the very fundamental thing, which I think Sanjay rightly mentioned right in the beginning, is the leadership. And I think engagement has brought into focus how much difference can a leader make to this. Now, what all goes into it will be something very, very, I hope we are able to learn a lot more today. The third is the organizations going forward are going to have a major tussle, a major challenge on maintaining engagement, because it's also a dimension of individual versus the organizational. Are the two views of engagement going to be the same? Is there going to be a situation where people are looking at engagement and people are looking for very different things, and organizations are offering very different things? Especially in an era when we are seeing disruptions, very major disruptions. These are not in books and not in any more HBR case studies. We are experiencing it, especially the industry. One of the industries which I look after is automobile, and we are witnessing there the kind of disruptions which this industry has not seen in the last 100 years. And so how is engagement going to be tackled in that kind of a scenario where a lot of fundamentals itself are going to change? Technology is going to, and that's the last dimension, what is technology going to do? And automation, that whole thing about touch and feel, to the extent that we had the liberty of doing it, remote working, more technology dimensions of interfacing and interactions, what is the impact that is going to have, and of course the work content impact of technology.
Hi, I'm Sumati Sampath from Infosys. I deal with a lot of millennials. You know, by 2025, all of us know 70% of our workforce are going to be millennials. How are we going to handle them differently? Yes, as you said, Verghese, they need instant gratification. It's a world of VUCA driven by SMAC. I don't know how we are really going to handle these millennials. So I'd like to hear from the rest of you how we are going to handle them.
Good afternoon. First of all, thank you for inviting. It's a very exciting forum, and Pallavi, I've been here the 3rd year, so thank you. I look at employee engagement. I was fortunate that I started my career with Unilever in the plant, in the manufacturing plant. So engagement was basically on the industrial relations, which we are now forgetting in HR. It's a dirty word in HR, and it's not a sexy part of the HR job. And that's where the foundation of engagement happened and made an impact on the business. So I was fortunate to see the transition from the industrialization, like what Rajeshwaran does, to move to completely a millennial generation, and what Adil Bandukwala mentioned about that you guys are all obsolete by now and you should move to technology. It's a good transition, but the fact is that there's another dimension, is also geographical culture. So what engagement we did in Kenya when I worked with Unilever there, or in Malaysia when we lived there, or in Netherlands, was completely different based on local culture. So I think somebody mentioned that one size does not fit all, and I think you mentioned that. Engagement today has only one thing that I feel is common, is a leadership. The seriousness with which leaders want to engage, whether it is country, industry, millennial or no millennial. I worked in Shell, which is a legacy company where everybody is 75 years old in the company. And engagement there is different. But one thing that determines, in my opinion, common factor across generations, across industry and across geography is the act of leadership. How much they are serious about engaging. And I would like to learn that angle more from the data that you have. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Fantastic insights already, and really look forward to this dialogue. So what you'll notice is, first of all, there's a lot of research here that's new. We just conducted this research over the last 6 months or so, and we did it not just in one country, we did it in several countries, and we wanted to get a specific look at India, at China. So you're going to see some different some differences between each country and the averages as well. You're also going to notice there's depth here. So don't worry too much about like writing notes on the slides, because most of what you're seeing on the slides is also in this white paper that you have in your package. So I just want to let you know that to start. Here's what our agenda is. We're going to deep dive first on the current state of engagement. Where are we today? Some of you mentioned, hey, it feels like we're stalled. But we'll see where we are today. Then we're going to have a conversation around how do we enable organizations leaders. So many of you said, hey, no matter what, Dr. Akil, you mentioned that's the common thread you've seen. It's always up to the leader, right? No matter what culture you're in, no matter whether the company supports you or not, at the end of the day, it is about the leader, right? And how that leader engages or personalizes that for each person. But we're going to look at some great new data there. And then finally, what do we do about all this information? We even have research around what should we do to move forward? How do we move the needle on engagement? So let's dive in. And let's dive in by making sure first we define engagement. Now at Dale Carnegie, the way we define it during these surveys is we look at these 4 things. We ask questions: do you recommend your company as a place to work? Would you recommend doing business with your company? 2 very different questions, right? It really makes employees stop and think. Do you give your best efforts every day? And oh, by the way, are you planning on leaving anytime soon, and for how much? So these are real questions we're asking on these surveys, and from that data, we then have 3 engagement levels. And certainly you've seen these 3 engagement levels in other industry research before, but it's where we take the data might be a little different, because we're taking it from those 4 questions, and then we're dividing you as you're either fully engaged, you're partially engaged, or you're actively disengaged. So really, just to get the dialogue started, how would any of you, let's hear from a few of you about how would you define engagement? What is your definition of engagement? Who wants to go first?
I would like, am I finding excitement, meaning and purpose in what I'm doing?
Excited, meaning and purpose.
Yep.
Okay. Any other definitions?
Where I
AJ?
think a place or an element that will create a sense of belonging.
A sense of belonging. Okay.
So one of the things that we've said about a lot at Adobe as well, we talk of work-life balance, and that's a bad word for us, because that's not really the best reason why somebody should be with you. I think engagement is if there is an opportunity for work and life to integrate.
Yes.
So I feel more connected to this organization. It supports my life.
Right.
Versus it's something I need to juggle with.
Okay. So we're hearing about certainly am I interested? Am I compelled to work here? Also, there's this work-life thing now, right? Which is perhaps a separate evolution of employee engagement. Yeah. So one of the most clear definitions we've heard on this is your employee willing to give discretionary effort? right? We're always looking for that discretionary effort. If someone's fully engaged, they're certainly going to want to give discretionary effort. But we're hearing these other real demands in a business world now that is increasingly being disrupted. Entire industries are being shaken up, and we heard about the auto industry. To me, that's amazing when you hear about industry analysts saying, oh, the companies that have the best position for the future of the automotive industry are Google? I mean, really? Isn't that interesting? It's like, talk about shakeup. I'm not sure I'd want to be GM right now, although I hear GM is in good position as well. So if we think about it, at least initially, as an employee that is willing to give a discretionary effort, now let's ask the question, why is it important? This is Gallup research. These statistics certainly help us to point to the business imperative of employee engagement. This is just not, as Pallavi was saying earlier, a feel-good thing. There's a business imperative here. We're not going to be able to profitably grow our business when we've got employees who aren't engaged. And so to me, some of this research here was fascinating to see 21% higher profitability among top quartile companies in terms of their engagement levels versus bottom. Productivity, lower turnover. These are some of the real business imperatives of why it's important. All right, so we know how it's defined. We know why it's important. Now let's get into the state of engagement. What are some of these statistics now showing us? First of all, our methodology. We did this entirely online. We had about 2,500 or so respondents in US, Canada, India, Germany, China. The numbers broke down about equally, so about 500 US, 500 Canada, 500 India, approximately, and across all industries and all geographies within those countries. Here's what we found. 23% are fully engaged. Okay. 54% partially engaged and 23% actively disengaged. Another one of our partners you may have heard of says the actively disengaged are those who are actively trying to sink the boat you're on. Right, these are the folks who are not only not working as hard as they might, but they're actually not only looking for a job, but they're talking to their peers and say, hey, did you know that Infosys is paying more or whatever, right? So, but what struck me about this one, and like many of you, I've worked with lots of companies across lots of geographies. I was almost a little disappointed when I saw this because in many ways, this hasn't changed, right? And these are the same numbers that we've seen for a long time. About a quarter very engaged, about a quarter actively disengaged, and everybody else in the middle. Okay, so does this tell us anything? Actually, when Rajeshwar, when you mentioned, I actually felt better after you spoke, because when you said, it's amazing we're able to keep people engaged given the industry disruption. Through that lens, maybe we're doing okay to stay the same, but maybe not, right? That's not what we want. So how does this look differently then by country? First of all, let's take a look at the fully engaged. Certainly, the number of employees who claim that they're fully engaged is a pretty low minority, no matter which country they're in. And in the middle, you have the majority. And then you've got a usually smaller group that is sometimes a larger group in China, you see, that is actively disengaged versus fully engaged. So another question for all of you, particularly some of you on the panel and our guests, does this research corroborate what you're seeing in your country? Go ahead, Rajeshwar.
A little surprised when it comes to the India data on the actively disengaged. It looks to be one of the highest. Actively disengaged.
Surprised by the 26%.
26. It's amongst the highest.
Yeah.
A little bit of a surprise. I would like to certainly understand from you what exactly does it mean. A very pure definition of actively disengaged.
Okay, a pure definition of it, we would go back to those 4 questions that were, that we asked. And if someone's willing to leave the company for $1,000, if somebody's not recommending your place as a place to do business, if somebody's not, recommending other employees come work here, obviously very actively disengaged. But we could get more granular with that data if you'd like to see it. We can ask our Dr. Mark Marone, who's done the research, specifically what the cutoff is there, but it's a certainly a quartile type thing. It's all about the data. Dr. Keel?
The time dimension.
Sure.
The time dimension. If you look at India, the fully engaged at 24-25% now, and if you look at India, say 30 years ago or 40 years ago, when unemployment was an issue,
right,
the figure was double.
Yes.
So with more jobs coming in, more opportunities coming in, people are also becoming choosy whether to be engaged or not.
Right, there's more
I
choice.
can afford to go somewhere else to feel more engaged. When jobs in China would have been almost similar, if you look at 4 decades ago. I don't know if there is corroboration from your data. When jobs are short supply, people are engaged, like willy-nilly. When jobs are plenty, people pick and choose.
But Akhil, I'll like to bring another dimension to it. One of the interesting things that I've been seeing, at least in the last 5 to 6 years, is you always had a section of people who would quit because of personal reasons, right? And I saw, and I'm seeing in different companies, that the data is increasing, the personal reasons data, especially first bounce candidates, people leaving in the first 2 years. And the interesting insight that I have is many of them, they may have taken student loans, have actually gone back to their hometowns and are not working. They're not working. There's a certain section because they're unsure of the choices and unsure of what kind of jobs do they want. But the interesting aspect is also that the parents are willing to support them. And if I ask the employees or the candidates, so to say, ex-employees, there's a sense of optimism. So they can go back to Jalandhar and Bhatinda and say, okay, I will get a job of my own liking. So I think it's also not driven just by the lack of jobs, it's also driven by the sense of optimism. And yeah, there's a sense of security is being provided by the parents. The scarcity, they don't have the scarcity mindset.
That's right.
Right? So, if you look at our entire demographic, India will have a larger proportion of the younger employees who are far more secure and perhaps a lot more unsure. Because if you look at, let's say, financial services, the largest proportion of the jobs that we will create would be in customer interfacing roles. And people don't want to do customer interfacing roles. And they are happier doing with sitting at home or going and working in malls. Because it's an AC environment, I don't have the risk. Or sitting at home. 55% actually I saw in my data, just sitting at home.
But I have to share that, when we did the survey, we ran an employee engagement survey in 2014 in India, and that figure just 4 years ago was as high as 36% fully engaged. And this year it has actually come down to 25%. So there's been a huge shift in engagement levels, and that too downwards in India data between our research itself. And I think that's a very valid inspiration.
Just a question is, where are we getting these respondents from?
So like he said, these are employees and leaders. So it's a mix of both from all types of company sizes and across sectors.
Yeah.
It's very diversified kind of a data.
One of the dilemmas that I have is that did recession of 2007-8 have an impact on a lot of this data? And the way I experienced it, a lot of companies had to ask people to go at that time. People who were normally engaged, who had spent years and years in an organization, were asked to go. Could the data be different pre-recession and post-recession?
Right. So the point is that during the Great Recession, it changed people's attitudes toward work. Were you asking how did the data fare during that time period?
Yeah.
It's a good question. We started doing this research in about 2011. So I'm not sure.
But to answer that, maybe the answer is in what Pallavi said. 2014, which is 6 years post 2008, the engagement levels were still high. It's perhaps now when people are in the consolidation mode and there are maybe regulatory challenges and other challenges that are happening, growth challenges, where people, the optimistic bunch is not getting the kind of opportunities and are not able to make the choices that they thought hitherto they would have made. So I don't think it's 2008, it's also context.
Data here, there's something passive missing. If you look at sectors like mid-sized manufacturing, where they don't measure, it is a company like where I work with IBM or Infosys, we go and measure every weekend literally. So sometimes we capture an IT, ITES and white collar jobs here more than the blue collar jobs which are passive. We do not know where they belong actually. There may be high level of disengagement, but it never gets recorded.
Right.
That's worrisome from angle of a talent pool.
We can dive into the demographics maybe a little later. I'm not sure whether I have it in the white paper.
But I think that's a relevant point.
Unless there's a skew towards services versus manufacturing, we'll have to find that out.
So if we were to look at our industry, right, I think there are 2-3 things that we've got to consider. I mean, I think, like I mentioned earlier, one size does not fit all. If I look at the millennials, for them, engagement is doing more than work. I mean, I think most millennials that we look at today, they have a purpose beyond work. Work is, just to sustain their life, but they want to, be out there committing to a social cause, to the environment, to, what have you, right? For them, that is engagement. So if as an organization we are able to provide avenues for CSR and other activities, I think we see them a lot more engaged and less disengaged, to your point.
Right.
At the middle management, I think it's the growth. Okay, the reality is it is a pyramid and there are not as much opportunities as there would ideally should have been, right?
Right.
And there is an actively disengaged population there as well. People who want to be a leader but have not got an opportunity to be a leader.
That's right.
I think if you look at it, the reasons can be different, and I think there is a very valid point which has been made in terms of the non-services space. I think I'd be very interested to know what the data looks like over there.
Sure.
Yeah.
That would be.
If I can add, let me tell you, in politics, we look at millennials very closely. Okay, I think they're going to determine the future of the country. Now I'll tell you where I think there is one, perhaps, sweet spot that is being overlooked by majority of people. See, when we looked at the Indian millennial data, and I think quite a few of you have expressed your concern about how to handle this extremely volatile, dynamic, unpredictable, irrational, unstable, whatever. The truth is, it's a very wide age gambit now. So somebody who's 22 is also a millennial, somebody who's also a late 30s is a millennial. Now you're talking about somebody who's single and probably looking for a date on Tinder, and you're comparing that person with somebody who's into a midlife crisis with 3 kids and a wife who doesn't want to see him the next day, or vice versa. So I think you can't afford to generalize the millennials anymore. It's actually one that you now need to recognize that it is not like one monolithic or one size fits all. So I think companies need to look at it, because we clearly see a trend in terms of social media consumption, impressionability, subject to propaganda influence, income appetite. Are you on Facebook or Snapchat? Makes a difference. So I think even in companies, you got to not look at millennials as a problem or an opportunity, because they may be a problem and an opportunity because they're in a pretty diversified spectrum of age. The other point is, I think what people mentioned, I want to throw them up early, is what you all said is leadership. Now, I can tell you that my dealing with a lot of people in the corporate side, and we do a lot of that, tells me that, essentially, whether it's a country or whether it's a corporate, a company or even a country becomes like the leader you choose or the leader you have. Invariably, I'm not going to take names, but there are corporate firms whose culture has changed when the leadership's changed. So a more conservative, less risk averse, maybe somebody who's more, kind of playing it safe, more worried about quarterly results will have a different mindset. Vis-a-vis someone who's probably playing the long run game and saying, okay, the people matter. You mentioned something about the fact that engagement in business, there might be, according to you, a partial conflict. And I think it's not an either or eventually, because it has to be complementary in the long term. But that's something that I think we need to think of. So, I feel HR people very often, with the best of intentions, and I think all of you probably will qualify, because I think all HR people have their heart in the right place, but your CEO influences that much more than what you can do. And that can perhaps negate all your effort and maybe sometimes augment it. Yeah, and one quick point that I wish to make here is, and this is a larger one, you take your mission or a vision statement and you put another company in it and nothing changes. So you put different companies for different vision and mission statements, and who says I don't love the customer? Who says I don't want to contribute to the environment? I don't think anybody is going to run away from that. So we all sound very similar. And I think, when I think one of you mentioned the millennials right now, I see broadly a lot of cynicism, because they don't like this grandiose platitudes of, what what a mission or a vision or a value statement is. I think there is a sense of, are we walking the talk? I remember when I started my corporate career, I was aligned to retiring from the bank I joined. The guy who joins you today probably leaves you because they get disillusioned with the fact that it's good, but it's not what I'm looking for. So they're not unhappy with you. And therefore the problem that we all have. Why does this guy leave me when I'm paying well, I'm giving Starbucks coffee, and we are all doing a lot of these team building workshops. But I think the person is moving on because something is not gelling. And I think, we have become a cynical society, like it or not. Don't blame the young. I don't blame the young. I blame Akhil and myself for it principally. But, I do believe that we have become cynical increasingly because we are more aware. And if you're going to be aware, you challenge it. So my last point here would be that maybe, where I think the changes happened and where HR maybe needs to think of it, that have we begun to take it for granted that because these guys are hard to satisfy, my efforts don't really make that much of a tangible difference. So why don't I go a little soft on it anyways? Because I am going to have an attrition rate no matter what I do. So what happens is that I begin to tell myself, I am that business partner. Now I feel that may be the trap that one should think of. HR as a business partner is a very sexy concept. But in the process, has HR forgotten what it's meant to be? Because maybe you're so driven by the numbers and the ROI and the calculation that have we probably taken a backseat on the very fundamentals of why we exist?
I have a couple of points, Dan.
Sure.
I think if we look at what you all mentioned, 2014, the same platform of a survey had a lower actively engaged than we are today. Or did you say it was higher?
It was higher then and lower now.
So I think there are a few factors at play, ranging from evolving values, not only at the millennial level. I think we can debate about what has influenced those values. It could be economic progress, it could be wider perspectives. But I think evolving values is what is probably changing. Look at it a few years back or a few generations back. Maybe because of economic environment, my primary value of having a job was lower down on Maslow's hierarchy of needs. It was about the basics. Today, the basics are taken care of. Work is not the primary driver for me, but it is a means to something else. If my purpose and if that value aligns with what my job gives me, the excitement that my colleagues provide, etc., that's when I'm going to be engaged. If not, I will define for me, I will seek out whether someone mentioned CSR, someone mentioned traveling, someone mentioned, the passions. I think that is what is evolving. Maybe it's driven more at the millennial stage, but look at it across the board. There are more retired people today traveling to visit Europe than ever in the past. And I think all of this is a function of evolving values and evolving engagement.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Sure.
our engagement going to be in the future?
That's a great question. How is engagement going to be in the future given the gig economy? Let's proceed through this, because I think some of these points you're bringing up are going to reflect in some of this research coming up. Maybe we can project a little bit better on the future, but we're able to at least now say where were we before and where are we heading now. And you're going to see some changes here, just as you have here with India. And we'll also give a chance for our German and Chinese colleagues. Again, there are other slides here that talk about the mixes. So let's progress here. A number of you asked this question about what is the difference between the employee experience and employee engagement. Here's how we define it. Those first three boxes on the left are what our research has clearly shown for the past several years are the things that influence engagement. Number one, an employee's relationship with their immediate manager, which has the biggest effect. The belief in senior leadership. And the questions there relate to, are the leaders of your company taking the business in the right direction? And then the third one, pride in the organization. That reflects, does the company share my values? We heard that a number of times here. If those three things are in place, you're going to have very high levels of engagement. Now, here's what started to creep into this research now. Other questions have had increasingly statistically significant responses that we didn't expect. Things like the balance with my personal life. Things like the work environment, and we heard about banking. That's a different work environment. We heard about the Great Recession. That changed everyone's work environment. But even at a very basic level, what's it like to come into this office every day? There could be things going on there that are influencing this. So we define the employee experience as adding those two dimensions onto the first three. Now, all of those things influence employee engagement. And certainly what this tells us is this is complex. You've all brought up some points that weren't even in here. We all know how complex these issues really are. However, the biggest lever to pull, the one that we all have the chance and that we get excited about, is that leader. And if the leader can inspire those emotions, they can inspire that someone feels valued. That one question that had the biggest statistical significance in this whole thing was, my leader cares about me as a person. I can remember 30 years ago starting in business, that was like, oh no, that's not, you don't need to do that. Right? That was like, no, I don't want to do too much personal. Oh, my leader needs to care about me as a person, otherwise I don't want to work here. I want them to, they need to show me. So if I feel valued, if I feel confident, if I feel empowered, if I feel connected, if I feel those things, then I'm going to be engaged. And who has the best opportunity to leverage those feelings or invoke those feelings? It's the leader. It's the leader. And to Sanjay's point, one of my favorite Emerson's quote you made me think of is, an institution is the lengthening shadow of its leader. There's no question that the senior leadership are going to have a negative or positive or neutral impact, absolutely, and a strong one. Even still, the biggest lever to pull is the manager and that relationship they have with their team. And that's what we can control, and we can also control some of these other things, as we'll get into. So here are a few more questions we asked to try to drill down further on the leader's role in employee engagement. We asked leaders three things. Number one, we asked individuals three things. Number one, does your leader seem fully engaged themselves? Right? Funny. Number two, do they seem to care whether you're engaged or not? And number three, do they seem to be actively working on your engagement levels? Interesting. Again, some interesting regional differences. Number one here, do they feel engaged? What a difference there. And this was the first question that I'm dying to ask Gerard, because China at 18% is just a, wow. And then, do they,
it's always the lowest.
Certainly a very dynamic economy, no question about that. We all know that.
In fact, if I may add something here, Dan.
Yeah, sure.
The survey that we do internally.
Yeah.
So the leaders who are the most engaged
Yes.
have a most engaged team, and that clearly correlates.
That's the leaders who are most engaged have the most engaged teams.
Yes.
What I thought you were going to say is the first part, we actually found demographically, there's some questions about demographics, that the one demographic that correlates most strongly with engagement is the higher you go in the chain, the more engaged you are.
Then
But you're also saying the
That's the
more
other one.
engaged you are as a leader, the more
Leader.
engaged your team is,
Yes.
and you'll see more of that here too. Absolutely true.
That's exactly the point, Dan, which is very important. Since most of us as HR, we speak to technical managers.
Yes.
So how do you bring this engagement thing of the engaged leader or engaged manager at the bottom will have an engaged team? We have a formula, E is equal to MC squared.
Okay.
Yeah, E is equal to MC squared. Everybody knows, every techie knows this.
Right.
Engagement is equal to manager, commitment, and connect. Managers, commitment, and connect.
Managers, commitment, and talent.
Yeah. And we went on to explain everybody uses it, people join the companies, leave the managers. Yeah, but everybody says, but nobody knows what did the good manager do right and what the bad manager did wrong, so that the employee left. So the engagement is on 4 levers, and your research brought it very clearly. The manager is the center of engagement. The organization, that includes HR, facilitates this process.
Right.
When I say manager owns, he owns out in 4 levers. One, from an employee perspective, me and my work. Are my goals set properly and explained why they are set?
Right.
And how do I achieve? That brings meaning to that job, what the person is doing. Second lever is me and my company. Am my work contributing to the larger purpose of the company?
Right.
I'll get purpose for my job. Me and my career, the third, me, is how do I link my job, current job, and how does my manager facilitate my career growth further? That is my hope for my job. And last, which most of you all spoke about today, especially with millennials, is me and my life. Because millennials just don't come for work, they come for a larger purpose. So how do I integrate my work-life balance, my passion, and provide an environment where that could be nourished? So this is where absolutely the immediate manager or the leader speaks a lot.
Excellent. Yeah, please.
So to add something to what you said, it's not only does my work contribute to the big picture, it's am I aware of it?
Yes.
Is my boss aware of
Absolutely,
it?
yes.
And is my boss able to explain it to me?
Exactly, Andreas.
So that's the thing that leaders often, so I worked a lot with volunteers. Not as a trainer, but as a volunteer myself. So I was leading an organization with 56 volunteers. And I saw many of them are highly engaged in their volunteering work. Highly engaged. And many of them talked very negative about their job. You know? And I said, so what's the problem in your job? I was not a trainer at that time. And they said, nobody cares about me. My boss doesn't care, and it's not my company doesn't care. The company is something, it's not tangible. It's the people there, and the boss is, so when we go back one slide again, it's the emotions that the boss needs to create. Yeah, I'm valued, I'm confident, I'm empowered, I'm connected. So that's the impression that my boss needs to give to me.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And
Andreas, just sorry, one more point I'd add, right? So again, the same research, internal research that I'm talking about, if people are associated with an ERG or a cause, we find that they're far more engaged, right? And Dell has a number of ERGs that we sponsor, and there's a clear linkage. So if you're going out and doing some community service, like the example that you shared, the volunteering work, they are far more engaged at the workplace, is what we find internally.
Okay.
In fact, to add to that, I've seen in some countries like say Malaysia, or if you go to eastern part of India, where development is a little slower, people don't really think of me, myself. Genuinely, they don't. They identify with the company to such an extent that my company is respected here. And I take pride in belonging to a company which is doing a lot of work there. So my boss may be a completely four-letter word, but I'm okay. Because the overall image that I enjoy working for Shell, for example, is a very big takeaway for me. So I automatically get engaged because I relate with the company's work in the outside company activities on a social impact is so great, and we never capture that. And many people stay only for one reason. This company is good, it's contributing, and I take pride because when I tell people I'm working for XYZ company, I feel very proud. Tatas may not be the best paymasters, but why would he stay for 27 years in one company?
Yeah. So from my experience, that's totally different in Germany. Yeah. So that's my role here to tell what's about in Germany. So in Germany, people don't care so much about the image of the company.
Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, it's more about so am I valued? Can I contribute here? And the younger I am, then the more important it is to understand that. It's not so much about the company in Germany. It's much more because, you know.
I would like to share just two examples.
Here, if you go down a little south to Tamil Nadu and maybe in other parts, I'm not too familiar, the wedding invitation actually mentions that the boy working with Tatas and the girl working with Infosys, so in bracket, they take so much pride. They take so much pride to say that so-and-so is working and this company gets associated.
You think I still have a chance?
When Union Carbide...
That's an interesting merger. Or an acquisition, whichever way you look at it.
I think this is... I still have a chance, you think. But I feel... I would like to make 2 points. I think what Andreas says is absolutely right. See, in most organizations, this communication down the line is very poor.
That's true.
It was so even in Tata's. When Ratan Tata brought in this Malcolm Baldrige award program under the name and title TBEM, Tata Business Excellence Model, and started implementing some of those processes, we realized that effective communication can make all the difference. Yeah. You have a vision, you have a mission, you have core values and all that, and it is all hanging in notice boards in the back areas of the factory or the hotel or whatever. Very few people have understood in relation to that vision and mission, what is it that I should start doing differently from tomorrow. So one company I can never forget who did an enormous amount of outstanding work was Tata Steel under J.J. Irani. I went there as a Malcolm Baldrige examiner, and that year they were supposed to win the Baldrige Award, that is TBM YRDQE Award, they were getting closer to that. So from American Institute of Quality, there was a gentleman who had come, I still remember his name, Dr. Steve Hoisington, as an external assessee, and we were all together. So J.J. Irani made a presentation to all of us and said, this is what we do to communicate our vision, mission, and build engagement and commitment among all our employees. And Steve was whispering in my ear all the time, this is a spiel, HNS, don't get carried away. Everybody talks like this. And then I said, let us check it out, don't draw any conclusion. Let us check it out. And then he said, there is an internal communication department, he'll tell you how we have communicated in interior parts of Tata Steel, to build engagement for employees. Enormous loyalty and engagement we build. They will tell you how. So we went and checked with a few employees, what is the vision of your company? And he reproduced. We want to become, Tata Steel should become the lowest cost producer of steel, quality steel in the world. And I looked at Steve. No, this is also a spiel. Everybody must have by-hearted. Don't get carried. Then we went to Cheria coal mines in Bihar. Several thousand feet below the mine, he told me, now you ask this question. There are these miners. You call one of them, not these two, the third one who is at the rear. Call him, ask him. I called that worker. Imagine a worker who is a tribal recruit from interior forests of Bihar, trained in Tata Steel. In Hindi, I asked him, what is the vision of the company? There are, of course, one or two others who translated it properly. What is the vision? He said, Tata Steel should become the lowest cost producer of quality steel in the world, outperforming Nippon, Hugwans, and all that. Then he was surprised, but he said, all that is fine, but ask him, what is he doing differently to implement that vision? What is it that he is doing differently today? Ask him. I felt it is a little unfair question, for that, But this guy was pushing me. I asked him, And he was completely shocked to hear the response. He said, can I take you to the drawing board? There is this graph that we have put up. I'll take you and I'll show you. We have been trained in the last 3 months how to take the ore out in a new method, a new process, and put it in the conveyor so that it goes till the area where it gets lifted. With that, I am digging so much more ore, contributing to improvement in productivity in this mine, and with this, I am making Tata Steel the lowest cost producer of steel in the world.
Very good story.
I explained this to him, and he took me and he showed me in the graph how it is moving. He couldn't believe his ears. He said,
This
is a world-class company.
Yeah, this can't be shared.
Fantastic.
This is a world-class company. I have no further questions. Let us go back. So communicating across all constituencies, horizontally, vertically, making every employee understand, like what he rightly said, Andreas, and what Akhil was also talking about, Ritu mentioned, communication effectively and making them understand what is in it for him and what is he doing differently now. Then it gives the new meaning to his life. He thinks he is playing an important role in the journey of achieving this vision. That becomes the key for engagement.
A beautiful story. Beautiful. Very compelling. Thank you.
And I think so it is very important, what HNS has brought in a very important is how do you communicate at the last man standing.
Right.
Yeah, I can quote an example from my previous company, which is Arvind Lifestyle Brands. They had a vision of moving to 5,000 crores with a 12% EBITDA by 2018. So if you look at this numbers only, you will have a full statement. But they made it simple for the sales guy who sells the store in Aiswal or anywhere. It's 5 into 12 into 18.
Great. Aditya, did you have a point you wanted to make?
That's that.
I think we're talking about demographically different kind of people. I think, going by what you mentioned about Abraham Maslow's, in India, I think you still have, I think the work content, depending on the demography that you're addressing, makes difference to how you engage the employees. Like, I can't engage somebody working in a manufacturing the way I would engage them in Adobe. Right? There's a huge difference because the demographics are so different, The autonomy, mastery, purpose, I think if I have to just summarize all that has been mentioned, which kind of talks about the employee motivation and employee engagement, may not be too relevant if I'm working in my hometown, where just the brand of the organization is enough to give me pride. Right?
Yes.
So it depends on various factors, but I think one of the most important thing is the demography is the king as well as the employees, and understanding the demographies is the difference.
So to add complexity to the discussion, as much as the work is important, as much as the context is important, I think one of the other things is, and formal communication is important as well, but we are ultimately social animals. I think even though you talk about technology and the advent of technology, one of the things we have to rekindle is the art of having conversations, which is diminishing. With lower attention spans, with heavily metricized performance management systems, as well as maybe immature managers and lack of time. All of those contribute to people not spending enough time. And yesterday I was doing my branch visits and people said, what is the ask of managers? Some of them, the not so high performing ones, we just want to sit and have a coffee and have conversations. So I completely agree that it's not about what the manager is able to do as much as the manager has to be the expert leader, but it's also how the manager makes him feel by having those conversations.
Right.
So that is another skill which would be very, very critical, especially given how we are behaving in our personal spaces. I don't think we are also having enough conversations in our personal lives.
Yeah, great.
So I just want to quickly share something.
Sure.
In fact, I thought, HNS, you completely stole the thunder. I was thinking, should I share an example? How can you top that? But I think there's another element just to build on what you just said, which is, do I feel like my opinion is heard? And so this whole piece around inclusion,
right,
I think is a big driving factor, and I wonder whether the numbers you showed earlier as well has anything to do with, is my voice heard, right? Am I asked for my opinion? And I don't mean that on a regular basis, but do I have a seat at the table, so to speak, within my team.
Right.
At least we're seeing that in our organization. I've seen it in similar, at least technology companies that I have, say, more experience with, is this whole piece around, you know, do people get taken along because that's the only thing you do, you follow?
Right.
Or do you get to participate? So
Yes.
is there participation and inclusion? And I think the other, to your point just now on conversations, very quickly, I don't know how many of you know this, but at Adobe it's been about 5.5 years where we stopped doing the formal performance evaluation with a rating system, right? We gave that away to start what we call check-in, which is exactly this, right? Having continuous conversation and dialogue between manager and employee. There's a framework, but there are no numbers, and there's no rating. And I think this piece that you shared, you know, in terms of those 5 elements that impact employee engagement, it's one of those steps to say, how do we kind of force you into having this conversation without mandating it, where the conversation will talk about your goals and expectations aligned with the organization and your BU, obviously feedback, and then a whole piece which is around growth and development and your whole self. Right? And I think if that, we're not the best at it, while we probably were one of the first to get off the, you know, formal performance ranking. But I think that's a very powerful model to keep this conversation continuous and to have the manager consistently be challenged by their people if that conversation is not a meaningful conversation. And a lot of our employee engagement feedback is around this. The only thing I can tell you in the last 4 years that I've been at Adobe is when we started out and asked people, how often are you having these conversations? It was about, you know, do you have a conversation every quarter would be a 50-50. That's changed to over 75% now.
Great.
Then we asked, what's the quality of conversations? And there would be at least 60-75% saying dissatisfied. That's moving to less than 50 to 40% now, which means we're slowly learning how to really use this mechanism as a tool towards engagement versus just performance management.
Yeah.
You know, I think the conversation around conversations to me brings in another dimension of what is the role of supervisors, and I think the broader bit is relationships. Look at our society as well, look at divorce rates, look at screen time, look at all of that. Relationships itself are reducing in terms of their quality. And I think the same is reflected at the workplace. The primary relationship is the relationship with your manager, with your team, with your peers, with your friends at work. I think there's this adage, right? Relationships are built one conversation at a time. So whether it is the manager doing that conversation with their team member or a husband doing it with their wife or their kid, I think it's the same concept. So I think an angle that really drives engagement is that relationship. Does my manager, so, you know, like Rajkamal, you mentioned, you were doing those conversations, right? I also had a group of employees who were really talking about a great manager that they had. What they said was, this person has both formal and informal conversations, you know, the check-in, so similar continuous dialogue conversations, but more importantly, the informal conversations. And what they said is, even if I forget that I mentioned that I had this aspiration, this manager 6 months later will come back to me, hey, listen, you wanted to do this, I have this opportunity for you, would you like to do it? And they're blown away with that. So I think it's, we need to think about relationships and how we can strengthen and build those relationships across the org.
Right. So we had some great examples of, from the coal mine to Continental Tire, great examples of how we've heard or seen vision statements be repeated back and understood to the level of how it impacts my job, to ERGs at Dell and relationships and the importance of advocacy and relationships. All are difficult things to manage, but come back to that individual leader. So let's take a look back up here again at how we ended up with these 3 questions. We were really trying to get at this, is what can we do about this? How can we move the needle on this? And the first question again was, does my supervisor seem fully engaged themselves? The second question was, do they seem to care if I'm engaged? And the final question was, are they working on engaging me? This is the one that took me aback, really. I think they all did, because these are all the minority share here, right? It is the minority, in some cases a very small minority, that says my manager seems fully engaged, or they care whether I'm engaged, and it goes down even further here in most cases. Are they actively working to engage me in these conversations in understanding that vision statement and as it applies to my job? Or do they employ me, understand me and my employee resource group over here and what my needs and expectations are? Right? Rajeshwar, I think you want to say something.
Yeah, just one question. Germany continues to surprise.
Germany. Andreas.
The way, and let me tell you why I make this statement, because we have an exposure to Germany, and I have a very high respect for, probably I think it's the most productive country. Very high levels of productivity. And very sophisticated productivity. So I'd like to understand why is it so?
You know, I worked a lot with leaders in the last years, and for example, a few weeks ago I worked with a big car rental company, and it was sales leaders in the room, and we discussed how much time should I spend with my people, yeah, developing them, taking care of them, and so on. And they all they had high numbers, yeah, 40%, 60% of my time. So, okay, now let's take a piece of paper and write down how much do I really spend. And we collected the numbers and then we evaluated it. So it was anonymous. And the number was very, very low. So it was below 10%. Below 10%. And I was asking them, okay, now we know how important it is. We are totally aware of it. We don't do it. What's the problem? And they said, pressure, no time. I want to, but I cannot do it. And I said, okay, you are not only a leader, you also have a boss. How is he doing? Same thing. So when I as a leader don't care about my leaders, they will not care about their people. So as the higher in the hierarchy I am, the more responsibility I have to be a role model. And that's an issue here, absolutely, in Germany. I can totally agree on this one. The leaders don't take enough time and enough effort to work with their people on their development and whatever. Yeah. And yeah, you mentioned from Continental, you said, so people join companies and leave their bosses. We all know that. Yeah, it depends on my boss a lot if I'm engaged or not. Yeah. And if the boss doesn't care, cares but doesn't act like he cares or she cares, then nothing will change. Yeah, that's my experience over the last years.
That's the reason in our that formula of E is equal to MC square. We never used communication. We said commitment.
Yeah.
That is genuine leadership, which we talk about, and that comes when you care, when I get valued as an employee. So is my boss doing it with me.
Yeah.
I translate it down.
So in another company, what we did is we calculated also with a group of sales leaders. So how much time should I spend on, for example, doing co-visits with my salespeople, going to the customer? How much time should I spend on coaching and so on? And then we added it, yeah, the number, the days per year, and with all the other responsibilities they have, it's more than 300 days. Yeah, I don't work so much. So where do you want to stop doing things to be able to do that? And there was silence in the room. And then we worked on, okay, what could I stop doing so that I have more time to do that, to take care about my people.
Dan, I have a take on this part of actively works to engage me. Is how one engages is also important. There was a time when engagement was considered face-to-face in some culture, mainly in Asia, South Asia, right up to whole of, and part of Africa. Face-to-face meetings, walking about, was considered healthy engagement. Now you have bots and then you have chats, so don't come to me. Go to your 9x9 screen and find out. I remember working in one of the Unilever factories. We had these pigeonholes outside my office where a lot of forms were kept. And a lot of workers came at lunchtime to take a leave form or a loan form. And they would come and ask, I want a form. They know very well that the pigeonhole has it, but they would still come to ask. They wouldn't talk.
Yeah.
And chances were they would go back without a form. What's happening now with all this so-called AI and ML? I'm for it. I'm quite excited. I'm quite excited with that, but at the same time, we are losing the human touch. Yeah. We are not interacting.
I think there are many, many options how we can engage people. At the end, only counts, does the person feel that I do something that I care about and do something to engage him or her. Can be different ways.
So one question, Dan, in the research, have you also captured in terms of, because we have different countries here and we have different cultures in all these countries. So how does culture then influence engagement? Have you captured anything around that?
We have not specifically asked about culture's influence and engagement. We can only interpolate a bit here from the data. So let me move forward through some of the data here. We've got a lot of more ground to cover. And I think some of the comments you've made are going to be showing up here, particularly around the role of the manager and to personalize this for people. And how can we, as HR leaders, empower those folks better? All right, so first of all, let's look at engagement killers. These are the numbers of the different issues that respondents brought up that were killing engagement in their current role. And if you take just a look at the top ones, here they were. These were the things that they felt were killing engagement or negatively impacting engagement. So I'd like to hear from one or two of you about, do you have a process that you use to identify what engagement killers are and then doing something about it? So use one or two examples of that. Do you have any?
So maybe I can share some of this. The second, actually we're kind of right now working on the second part because, and we still, we went back to the old school way which all of us talking was having more conversation. So in my organization we do something known as simply called a voice of employee. It's a quarterly program where we select a different mix of group of people where we go ahead and we just talk to them. We just have a conversation. There are no questions. We just want to gauge the mood around certain parameters. And every time we choose a different group. Off late in the last 3 quarters that we've had, the second one came up as a major thing, as a concern, especially from the people who are young engineers who have joined us. And we have enough room for growth. And we're kind of surprised. So we're trying to dig more. We're still not at the conclusion. But then as part of that process, because when they come and have an informal conversation, instead of answering a survey, the results or the responses that we get and the insights are much more deeper than on a survey form. So we're trying to avoid the survey forms and having more conversations.
Got it.
So that's what we're doing.
So using the surveys to capture that data.
Yep.
Okay. So this is one way, certainly, to attack engagement is by removing barriers. But that's not the only way. That is something that companies are doing. They look at their engagement survey. They identify what are the barriers. Okay, we need more training, whatever those things are. But what we're certainly seeing here is there's no question that when we look at the big data and we see that engagement is stagnant, we know that it's complex, we know that it's not new, and we know that this takes deliberate action, right? So what percentage of, 85% of employees, employers, leaders of organizations feel that employee engagement is critical. It's a top priority, they're saying. But our new research says that employees are saying they only notice it, about a third of them are noticing that it's important at all. That it is brought up as important. So if we think this is critical, but employees aren't hearing the message, is there anything else that we might learn from that? First of all, how employee engagement is perceived as a top priority does vary by country. And here are some of those changes between countries. These are the percentage of folks who strongly agree that my organization is making this a top priority. Okay, so where does employee engagement fit into a manager's work priorities? To me, the next couple of slides will help us think about engagement differently and kind of boils together some of the comments that I've heard and ideas that we've heard expressed today. So 24% of employees feel that this is an important part of what they do every day. So only 24% of employees feel that this is an important work priority. Do I make this a daily priority? Well, occasionally I do, 26%, not really at all, 11%. Frequently, 38%, but every day, do I make this a daily work priority? Less than a quarter of employees say they make employee engagement a daily work priority. Well, think about that. A daily work priority. What are some of the other things that they need to do? And how does this vary by country? First of all, by country. There's a difference here. It's always a minority that feel that they're making this a daily priority. But there is some pretty stark contrast, as we've seen in some of the other ones with Germany and China being the low. No question about it. But to me, this next slide is a big question. That is, how are your managers thinking about employee engagement? Are they thinking about this something that's on their to-do list, and they're balancing that against all the other tasks that they're doing? Or are they seeing this is something that naturally fits into their day? Think about this a little bit further. If they are willing to think about this as something that's important, this is something that I need to make a priority every day. If they're answering the question that way, they also tend to believe that their team will go above and beyond to make things happen. So again, if you're just asking those people who said, yes, I make it a daily priority, 42% of those people are saying that they believe their teams will go above and beyond to get the work done. If you make it a daily priority, your team will be engaged to the point where they'll go above and beyond to get it done. That sharply falls off. Even if you're frequently making it a daily priority, it sharply falls off. So if you're not making it a daily priority, it's not likely that you're going to be able to have a team that will go above and beyond. Okay, a couple more slides here. The outcomes. So if you're making a daily priority, what other outcomes do you have? Those same people who are making a daily priority have above average retention rates on their team. So they have teams that go above and beyond, and they have more of their teams stay long term. Probably not an accident. I'm making employee engagement a daily priority. My teams I'm retaining my teams to a great degree, and my teams are willing to go above and beyond. So what is it about employees that is preventing them from making this a daily priority? What we're saying that we need to do to make this a daily priority for leaders is three things. The research shows, number one, treat employee engagement like other top priorities. If you were to contrast the following, how important is you to finish projects on time? How important is it for you to keep your costs within budget? How important is employee engagement to you? You might say as a manager, I got to finish my projects on time, and I got to keep it to my budgets. So you might see these all as tasks that you have to do. What our research is showing is that if we start to look at employee engagement as a lens to get those other things done, so if employee engagement is a lens through which I look at, my team's not finishing projects on time, what can I do differently to help them feel better about their work, to feel more engaged so they will finish the projects on time. My team is not meeting their cost requirements. Oh, I've got to talk to them about the task of staying on budget. So rather than task orientation, it's an orientation of looking at employee engagement as the primary lens. So the three things that we said here, how can we enable leaders to make employee engagement a daily priority? Help them to treat employee engagement like other top priorities. Teach them the practical knowledge and skills to do that. How do you train them? How do I engage my employees? And I love this third one. As Chief Sales Officer of Dale Carnegie, I read this one a few times. Bring awareness to the personal benefits for leaders. I think that means selling, right? I think what that means is we need to sell our managers on why engagement matters. Like, why should they be engagement advocates? A question like this, would you like it to be easier to finish projects on time? Sure, I'd like it to be easier to finish projects on time. Let's think about employee engagement. If all of your employees were engaged, do you think they might finish projects on time more often? Right? So it does need to be sold. And this is some of what our research showed. All right, let's look at these. What are when we honestly examine the top priorities of organizations, employees are 3 times more likely to make engagement a daily priority when they think their organization makes engagement a top priority. So the big question is, back to that graph where we saw 85% of top leaders said engagement's important, but our research shows that only 33% of employees believe that believe that their organizations have done that. Why is there that gap? clearly there's something we need to do differently to communicate that employee engagement is a top priority. There's something we need to do differently, and this is what shows it. Who's surprised by this? Anybody surprised by this data so far? No surprises. Okay.
So just just taking an off-road here, something that's coming to my mind. So we've umpteen researches, interestingly from an HR standpoint, the umpteen researches show that, engagement, employee engagement increases profitability, managers engaged, the teams will be better engaged. There's so many researches that keep talking about this. My question is on the other side. We know this, but why are we always faltering? What is it that we are missing out?
What is it we're missing?
What is it that we are missing out?
Ajay, maybe I have a answer.
Just before you, so just my thought, something, I don't know, this is my thought and my opinion here. Are we engaged with our parents? We have children, are children engaged to us? If I go back to me and my children, my family, why are we so much engaged to our family? And when it comes to professional life, why do we see so much of disengagement happening? If I ask that question to myself, I just sometimes feel that as managers, as leaders, as employees, are we not caring enough and treating our people like our own?
Right.
I don't know, possibly that could, and whatever you covered, if I treat my junior or my subordinate like my brother, my sister, my own, possibly that commitment and a lot of things that you said, a lot of communication, everything will automatically fall in place. I don't know, maybe we're not treating as our own and we're just treating as you're just one of so many.
Yeah, AJ, I think that's a great point. I mean, empathy, if it's almost the difference between a task orientation versus an engagement orientation. If I think about a task that needs to be done, I can either roll it out and say we got to do this, or I can think about my team and empathize with what it must be like for them, and try to think about things from their point of view and communicate about things from their point of view. And that does take a different level of energy, at least initially, right, to think about it. Maybe ultimately it would take less energy once your team is engaged, but to begin with it's really to take ourselves and step back out of our own minds and put ourselves in their situation, their shoes, and say, how might they feel about this, and empathize with them. I think that's a really profound point. New habits?
Yeah, it's also very difficult to, drive new behaviors, inculcate or, imbibe new habits.
That's right.
And there has to be a rhythm to it. Yeah, it has to be conscious.
Yes.
We're talking about, organizations have, if you really look at the evolution of the workplace, I was reading in, this book, The Whole New Mind. I was reading that in Ford Motor Company, in the 60s, you were not allowed to smile. If you smiled, you were sacked in Ford Motor Company. That's what I read. So we come from a very task-oriented approach at work in corporate organizations. And talking of habit, breaking that down and now bringing this whole business about emotional intelligence, empathy, and emotionally connecting is a DNA change we need to have as leaders in our. And I think that's the point Dan is trying to make is how often do we really get our leaders hold us accountable for meeting deadlines, delivering on projects, rather than just purely employee engagement. If employee engagement is your goal, then everything else should fall into place.
I think there is some point we are missing out in terms of, Ajay, your point, that managers deliver or leaders deliver what they are measured on. And we measure quarterly results. We pat people on the back or kick them in the right part of anatomy for quarterly results. We do not pay attention to how much, and the question comes that, is my manager engaging me? We don't measure our managers on that, so they don't deliver. It's a byproduct, and it's a personalized style. It's not a concerted effort of an organization. So in the same organization, you'll find some departments highly engaged, another highly disengaged, same culture, same company, same organization, same product. So I think the whole focus on finding out whether managers or leaders are engaging is to put it on priority that will measure how many dead bodies you leave behind and not how much dollars you bring on the table.
Right.
Interestingly, I have a conflicting view on that one. And I think the point that he's made is something that should concern everybody. That if you know that employee engagement results in lower attrition, higher top line, higher profitability, then why do we go wrong, right? It's a very straightforward question. And I believe that there's a paradox here. And it's something that Rajkamal you mentioned, and somebody else mentioned about conversations. I find that the more you try and institutionalize conversations, because you are telling yourself that that's the right thing to do, you actually make employee engagement counterproductive.
Yeah.
I'll give you an example. I feel that, I notice a lot of people, leaders who spend time with their leaders and sub-leaders and employees. I spent 1 hour on appraisal, 2 hours on review, 3 hours on the next plan, 4 hours on XYZ, 5 hours on some peer feedback. It all is so structured. And I can tell you something, that conversations happen when you are actually sitting and talking, right? And I think what we have surrendered in the whole process of what I call is this corporate obsession to get it right, is that we've allowed our natural, instinctive spontaneity to disappear. So I'm telling myself, I spent 5 hours with my employee, I'm doing my best. Now, if I'm not getting the results, too bad. Well, the point is, how did you do that? And I think that's why I keep coming back to the point, that eventually if HR will have to go back to this classical origins. It's about relationships, it's about emotion, it's about connect. HNS story, there's one other fascinating story, maybe he can't narrate it today because it'll take some time, but he will tell you, and I heard him in one seminar I was actually anchoring, and he was my panelist. And he narrated the story of the 26/11 terror attacks that happened in Mumbai. And there is this couple of employees of the Taj Hotel in Mumbai who took the bullet on their chest and died when the terrorists were there in the hotel. Ask yourself, did that guy ever go through an employee engagement workshop?
Never.
And there is perhaps a story there.
So just to add to what
I think
Sanjay was saying.
that's where, Srinivas, I've heard you speak about this as well. I think, I wonder and often ask, does this really come from something called commitment? And we were recently in Delhi, Akil sir and me, at Tech HR conference, and we were speaking to someone who made a very fascinating statement. He was talking about diversity and inclusion. And he said, diversity is when you're really invited to a party. Inclusion is when you're asked to dance. And I thought that was fascinating. And then I could kind of correlate that to something I was reading. And I was looking at certain leaders who were giving fascinating stories at Davos, at the World Economic Summit. And there somebody said, the next industrial revolution should be a revolution of values. Yes. And therefore, I think if we can marry commitment to values that an organization really lives by, and that is what the Tatas have shown. And that's exactly, Sanjay sir, what you were saying about really taking a bullet on your chest, and that can happen through commitment. I think that's what my learning has been from this thing.
Just one comment, I'll not take more than a minute. See, during this 26/11, this Unilever worldwide leadership conference was going on in Taj. And the worldwide CEO of Unilever, incoming, outgoing, and the Unilever Indonesia, Unilever Singapore, all of them are there. About 50-60 Unilever CEOs of different countries, and about 15-20 India Unilever, Hindustan Unilever people. So the terrorist center, and the rest of the story. And then there's a girl by name Mallika Jagat. She still works with us. She's in Tata Trust. She moved there. 22-year-old girl those days. She was taking care of the party. That they had a cocktail in the night and get together after the leadership workshop. They'd come for the cocktail. So the security informed them that you should all close the door. There is some crisis and some emergency in the hotel, and some miscreants have entered and they opened fire. And switch off the lights. Continue the party, but don't open the doors. Close it from inside. That was the instruction given by the security. So they did that. She calls attention of all these senior Unilever people, and she says, ladies and gentlemen, there is a crisis in the hotel. There is some miscreants have entered the hotel and opened fire. So me, Mallika, in my capacity, I am in charge of this function. You don't have to worry. I take full responsibility for whatever happens. and you are all safe, I'll take you at the right time to a safer place, and you can continue with the party. You have any questions, you can ask me. She announced like that.
22 years.
Then 22-year-old girl.
Wow.
Then they shifted the conference after all what happened after 3 days to Central Park in that Parel, that ITC hotel. And they called her and they made her, put her up on the stage, and there was a standing ovation. She saved us, and actually she saved them. At 3 o'clock in the morning, she took them to a laundry area, helped them to move out to the hotel, and put them in cars and sent them to a safer place. So, Leena Nair, who used to be with India, she came to interview me. She asked me a couple of questions, and she asked me, how did this girl is only 1 year old in the company, how did you build so much of loyalty and engagement in her? What kind of programs do you do for building such strong levels of engagement? I said, look here, I should not talk about the programs I do. Number one. I mean, it doesn't happen, like that. We do a training program and engagement level goes up. See, it is a demonstration of leadership, values, like somebody was telling, I think Akhil mentioned and some of you mentioned. Human values demonstrated over several generations, social values, purpose demonstrated over several generations.
Culture.
It has built that DNA, it is part of the glue of culture in the organization that rubs off on everybody. When they come and start working in the company, it becomes very spontaneous and natural for them to put customer first and do whatever best they can to protect the interest and safety of the customer. So it comes very natural. Of course, we also do some programs and all that, which is, at this point in time, if I talk about it, it sounds frivolous. Let me not even do that.
Yeah, thank you. And Ruben, I know that you've been wanting to say something, so why don't you go, and then I'll move to the next slide here.
Yeah, actually, related to this point, right? I think since we are all HR professionals over here, the point is, what is the role of HR in bringing this as a top priority and helping employees see it? And I think the keyword over there is culture. So we are supposed to be, along with leaders, or at least coach leaders, to be the custodians and shape the culture. And I think, Sanjay, you mentioned it. What is the stated culture, which is on your walls, and what is the real culture, which is what you reward for, what you promote, what you encourage, what you recognize, and what you really put your foot down to say that, sorry, this is not part of our culture, it is not acceptable. And I think that is where, once that is clear, then it can be done, whether it comes to, you spoke about it. When we promote people,
right,
and we promote leaders, do we promote them purely for the business numbers that they bring in, or the how of it, the engagement of it? Because if we are showing that that is not our real culture, don't bother, people are not going to think that.
Gets to walking the talk, right? Are the decisions being made and consistent with the values or not? And the employees will believe that.
Yeah,
Yes, please.
Can I mention
Gerard.
something about why China is so low? Yeah. I think it has a lot to do with what everyone talked about in terms of driving employee engagement through integrity, walk the talk, and also living by your values. Because after the Cultural Revolution, the leader who came to power is Deng Xiaoping. And Deng said something really famous, and it becomes the motto for the Chinese economic development, which is whether a black cat or white cat doesn't really matter. If you can catch a mice, you're a good cat. So what that means is the end justifies the mean. So whatever it takes, right, to drive GDP, to drive wealth, to drive sales, it doesn't really matter, right? Just do it. Do the bottom line, get the results, right? So the whole society started moving. That's why you see this explosive economic growth. People went from having food stamps and food rationing on sugar and rice to like this abundance in economic wealth today in less than 25 years. So, but the side effect of that is because do whatever it takes, it got carried too far. People started making, there's a lot of cheating going on, fraudulent, fake milk, fake egg, right? And intellectual property theft, piracy, corruption, anything you can think of. But it's all justified because then you achieve results. But under that kind of environment, nobody's going to be engaged, right? I mean, you're being a bad guy. In our heart, we know we're being a bad guy. So one of my friend who is a business leader in his early 50s, he told me that China really needs Dale Carnegie because this is going too far. People are starting to suffer. The environment is suffering. Trust between people are suffering. Everything is suffering. So if we can really bring back the traditional values of mutual respect, being honest, have integrity, I think that would really drive up engagement level in China.
Thank you, Gerard. Yeah, I was talking to, I was shocked when he was explaining to me that he has an extra step in the sales cycle, which is that you qualify the prospect and then of course you present and then you close the deal, but then usually after the decision's made, there's another step, and that is there's a bribe that's made. And his sales reps need to decide. In his organization, we don't accept bribes, so you have to pass on that business.
Yeah, many times we make a proposal and the customer wants us to increase the price because the difference we can take out and split it between us. So, I mean, we have to reject that kind of business. Sales can double if we accept.
That's right. And in the process, you lose sales reps who will go to other companies because they don't have that same standard.
Right, exactly.
That's a challenge to lead.
Yeah. But if you do this for a long time, it's hard to be engaged.
Right.
Yeah.
So this slide here examines beliefs.
Very deep inside.
This examines beliefs of employees, beliefs that HR can influence. Because if employees believe that employee engagement is not a top priority, they're much less likely to make it a daily priority for themselves, right? So this measures those beliefs.
Then I have a clarification. Is
it
HR beliefs or the leaders beliefs?
Leaders. So what I'm saying is that if the leader believes that the organization is making employee engagement a top priority, if the leader believes, then they're much more likely to, as an employee level, make sure it's being done. It's being made a daily priority. Yeah. So I'm just saying that HR can influence that by communicating how important it is and communicating that it is a top priority. So you can influence the belief systems. So one of the key findings here is, how are we doing on time, Pallavi? We're down to what?
We've got another 15, 20 minutes.
15, 20 minutes. Okay, so we will move fairly quickly through a few slides here, so bear with me for a moment here. Pardon?
Oh, sorry.
Oh, it's okay. So there is also a big percentage, even though it's only 1 in 5, I'd call it a pretty big percentage, that believe that all this is a waste of effort. And if you think about it, many of us have come to learn what employee engagement means by being in different companies and forming an opinion on it, whether it matters or not. And we saw some half-hearted efforts about it. It didn't work. That's not going to work. That's a pretty big percentage of people that we all work with on a daily basis who are just not believers. So their beliefs are going to be a distraction for you. And it's another barrier that you need to remove, right? It's important that we work on these barriers, and this again can work at cross purposes with what you're trying to do. So removing barriers is a critical step, but it's not the only step. The other thing we need to do is make sure, as the research showed, that your leaders have the skills, and 43% strongly agree that they have the skills it takes to engage their teams. So the majority are saying they don't, right? The majority are saying they don't have the skills, which means that training can help here. 35% agree that the tools have been provided to engage them to be effective in employee engagement. Again,
to the leaders.
To the leaders.
Yeah.
So again, it's a third that really feel that leaders have the knowledge and the skills. My leader has the knowledge of the skills. Okay. All right, so let's look at some of these regions again. Providing effective engagement training by country. Are we as HR leaders and organizations providing effective training on how to engage employees? Germany again. Anyone surprised by how high India is here?
Not really.
Number one.
I feel it may be more. Little more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because we have a lot of young managers, first-time managers. Exactly,
Well, this is strongly agree. So you're right. It is more.
You know, my view is because this is a demographic that covers small, medium, and large organizations. This is possibly actually maybe skewed towards the larger organizations, because in our experience, the small and medium companies are just about possibly waking up, if at all, to anything called employee engagement yet. So I think this may be a fairly generous number.
But I think that's where the problem is. If you look at the outcomes, you know, people actively disengaged, that chart didn't look pretty. And if you say that I have had training, I'm okay, you're not even acknowledging the problem. So I think there is something that you need to be worried about.
But Raj, just one thing. One of the previous slides, and I was surprised when I saw this question on how they perceive the leader. For India, it was exactly the same in all the three questions, 33%.
Yeah.
So if you look at that, highest number of training, most of the people saying, yeah, it's needed. And in that section, it's completely flat, almost same.
Right.
And then the degree of engaged versus disengaged. So somehow it looks a little puzzling, because I don't know how people have answered
I think
those
it just
questions.
points to the fact that we are less self-aware.
Maybe.
Yeah, I think we are not connecting the dots. We're looking at these responses. When we are responding to a survey, we look at that question and we respond.
Yeah.
But if you really look at and analyze it, yeah, I believe a third of them think my manager cares for me or is engaged or whatever, but eventually everything else is not falling into place. Or maybe we are doing a lot of engagement training, but the quality or the type of training that we are giving is really not effective.
And maybe going back to the earlier conversation, what demography of people have really answered? My guess would be more of people in the IT and those, because those are more, I don't know.
No,
but
it's
then
a
those
mix.
demographics may also play a major role on the surveys, because end of the day, in the IT world, people are now looking more and more of work as an extension of their daily life, because they're spending 10 hours a day. So the perspective is very different when you ask those questions versus somebody who's doing a very different kind of job, like in her domain. It's a very different perspective that comes in.
Danny, very briefly, can I share an research we did in IBM? For example, I don't believe in exit interviews as a person, as a professional, because I don't think it gives the right answer. A lot of people who leave because of their immediate supervisor never gets captured. So we looked at 850 exit interviews, and we analyzed the reason why people leave. And I'll not go into too much details, but about 35.4 or 5%, they mentioned reason for leaving as lack of growth prospect.
Lack of growth, yes.
And excuse me, I mean, sorry for putting this, but large company like IBM, lack of growth prospect was not clicking. So we did a parallel group of people, mirror image, exactly same age, same experience, same profile, and asked them, what makes you stay?
This is good prospect.
And 36.5 or 36.7% said growth prospect. Now the reason is very simple. What you mentioned, sir, is very true. The managers of the first group were actually taskmasters. They were asking, what is your utilization? What's your customer complaint? What is this data? What is that happening? And the second one also were doing the same thing, but asking, what's your plan? Can I help you? What Adil mentioned about what can we do to make you happy here? How can you grow your career? So what we did, instead of doing all this training, and I'm being a little candid about it, we went and analyzed all the people who lost managers over a period of time, and actually separated 11 or 13 of them, only on the ground that they were doing more damage to the company for being managers than doing good.
Right? Yeah. So you eliminated the engagement barrier by eliminating the managers
people who were
losing
coming in
people.
the way of engagement, and sending a very big example to people that engagement is not optional.
Engagement's not optional.
It worked.
That's great.
That's right.
That's great.
1.5%
So you were acting, as this was brought up earlier, right, consistently with the values that you espoused.
And that resulted in 1.4% reduction in attrition
Wow.
Which
That's a
in
big number,
terms
yeah.
of money, it was something in multiple $1 million.
Right.
I think I'll go back to what Sanjay said, each person should have his own style. It should be very natural. I have worked under two diametrically opposite styled bosses. One was extremely tough and very, very harsh when he wants to scold you. And the engagement of people working under him was the highest.
Yes.
Was the best. Because he genuinely was concerned about them. Whenever they were in some problem, he would be the first to go and out of the way, break the rules, help them, and feel as though it's his own problem. Somebody in his family has got into some crisis, kind of genuine feeling in his body language you will see. And you will go out of the way to help the person. I worked under such boss also. I worked under a boss who is extremely articulate and very intelligent, but engagement levels he was not able to manage it as well as the earlier one. So I think some of these things are contextual. We need to define it, with reference to context.
Just one interesting part again in the statistics. Since Dr. Akhil mentioned about this first element of it, there's one more element which no one spoke about, which actually was surprising to me. The favoritism part of it. That was, in fact, I thought it was quite interesting and new.
Yes.
Is it increasing now, or
That was surprising.
that was actually surprising to me. 20% was favoritism.
Yes,
and,
big number.
I don't know.
That was
What's
very
your take on it?
surprising.
I mean,
No, I think
I have personally seen that is becoming in the young generation today. I think they are seeing through a lot of things.
Yes.
They can understand what's happening. Nepotism
Savvy.
is very clearly evident to them. So
Yeah.
this millennial piece, favoritism probably is coming because of that now.
So
What do you
I
say?
think that's a great point you've raised, Rajay. If you look at it today, people want transparency in everything.
Absolutely.
In
Yeah.
fact,
That's what they're used
and
to,
if you look
Glassdoor.
at it, we are even talking about having transparent feedback to leaders. Right?
Yes.
A
Upward.
social media kind of platform where you can go in and rate your leader. I mean, if Glassdoor can have it, why can't you have it in-house? Is the question.
Right.
That's a question we're debating.
Yeah, even
today.
moving toward, I was shocked 10 years ago when my team in India, we had 120 people in Chennai, everyone knew what each other made. Everyone knew each other's salary. I was shocked by that because in the U.S. nobody knows each other's salary. But apparently...
salary is an issue.
Salary.
No, but Ajay,
But the day the pay slips are given out, everybody's like, what did you get? What did you get? It's like-
so, but Ajay, I think just to add there, also the peer group is extremely well connected in India. I think maybe increasingly now. So I think the favoritism element plays out. I think one of the surveys that we did in a previous employer, the favoritism was one of the biggest delays for engagement.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to get fired by Pallavi if I don't move through the next few slides, because we do have some conclusions and a point of view that we want to share here. So this slide here gets back to selling. So we heard about India, for example. We were talking about, why is it everyone agrees that training is being provided, but we're not making a dent. Well, maybe it is because we're not selling it. Maybe it is one of the possibilities here is that we need to help leaders see the benefits of this. We need to sell them on it's not another task, and here's how it actually can make your job easier, right? If they feel their jobs are going to be easier, if they feel they're going to get reward or recognition, and Dr. Akhil, I know you mentioned that you don't believe in incentives, but you know what? If they're getting incentivized for driving results, then they're not getting incentivized, if they feel there's disincentive to do this, they won't, right? These are two things that companies can do to help sell the benefits and the impact it'll have. So if you enable leaders to make employee engagement a daily priority, those who do, let me see, I moved too quickly here. The percentage of leaders who make employee engagement a daily priority, overall, moderately, and very effective organizations. So if you feel your organization is very effective at communicating employee engagement in the priority as a priority, then you're much more likely to make that a daily a daily habit.
Yeah, I think it's saying that if organizations are moderately effective in communicating that employee engagement is a daily priority, then 36% of the leaders make it a daily priority. And then if they're very effective, you have as many as 65% of the
Making it
leaders
daily.
who make employee engagement a priority in their work. So it's about the organization being communicating the importance of the prioritization of engagement, and through the mechanisms of showing the personal benefits that, hey, if you engage your employees, you have less attrition, you have more performance, those are the personal benefits, that makes your job easier, and the rewards and incentives. So I think those are the mechanisms.
I'm curious to know one thing. When you disclose the data to employee, that this is the employee engagement level in the company, does it influence next result?
If you disclose the data, does it influence engagement itself?
Well, I hope it should.
So personal experience, it hasn't.
Huh?
It hasn't. It hasn't.
Hasn't.
I have a contrary point
that's
of view.
the point
I
of view.
believe it does. Because so again, in our organization, I'll go back to live examples, right? We have leaders who have poor ENPS scores, and we sit and work with them, and they get really motivated to really go out there and put an action plan in place. So while I agree you're taking away the spontaneity and the relationships, the action plans are designed around that as well. But what we've seen year on year, I don't know if it's a carrot or a stick, but a little bit of both maybe. It definitely helps. It definitely helps. So year on year, what we've seen ever since we started measuring ENPS is, as an organization, it has a rolling phenomenon. It just improves. Because others
Compound
get
interest.
inspired,
That's a good
and
learning.
others get
That's a learning.
Yeah, it's great.
No, it's
Akhil,
Akhil,
to answer your
traditionally, the employee engagement data is all completely disclosed transparently to all employees in most Tata companies.
Yeah.
That is, it is all put up on notice boards. And employee suggestions are welcome. They conduct what's called roundtable meetings and town hall meetings and seek their views and opinions. And an action plan is created based on the inputs given by the employees. And the action plan implementation also, employees get involved. So this becomes this is a routine, this is the requirement of Gallup framework
It
also.
has a favorable impact.
No, I think what happens is if employees perceive action to have been taken based on feedback,
Based on the
and
feedback, we
contrary,
take action.
if they feel that you have done all this jazz, but you have not taken action, it will drop.
Akhil, there are three.
I think that's a great point.
As
So
long as
where we've
that's the
seen,
reason. The employees see that something is happening.
So reverse
So
effect.
like we've just got the results again for this year, we've seen a significant dip in a particular population, right? And when we dive deeper into it, these were the managers who didn't do anything about poor results last year. So they got really
Good
big,
point.
So in
right?
fact, in SAP, in our employee engagement survey, a question is, have you seen action taken based on last year's people
Precisely.
survey results?
That's the key.
And that is the key one looked at. One other thought I was just thinking that we have kind of not touched upon when we're talking about, the importance of the manager and all that. At SAP, we do it, and I'm guessing in a few other organizations. Are we creating parallel paths so that managerial path is not the only source of nirvana?
Oh, yeah.
Right? So, for example, if people are not naturally passionate about all these things, engaging, talking, caring about the careers of other people, are we force-fitting them through our organizational paths to become managers? So, in SAP, and I'm guessing other companies, we have individual contributor paths, which will make the same amount of money, have the same amount of influence, as a people manager, and people move between these.
Right. It's not possible in all.
It may not be possible in all, but
right.
Yeah. I think the other point I'll add, in addition to action planning impacting the scores again year on year, the other part is what happens. We see is the feedback that comes in creates new avenues. So as an example, this survey, right? We have a certain group of night shift workers who've given us a suggestion. Why don't we look at a 4-day week? Work the same number of hours, which legally, we are evaluating whether we can or we can't. We probably can't, but we have suggestions which are very good suggestions which come up. I mean, it's difficult to work
People
night
engaged.
shift
People are engaged. The fact they give suggestion, they're engaged.
Yeah. So communicate it, sell the benefits of it, and then if we recognize and reward,
it improves.
Then again, there's even greater improvement, which is really just underscoring everything you've all just said.
76.
Yeah, there's very effective organizations, right? 76% if you compound the benefits of selling it as well as communicating consistently, recognizing and rewarding consistently. So what are our suggestions for you all moving forward based upon this research? We'll just do a couple slide summary here and wrap it up. Number one, again, treat employee engagement just like other top priorities. Make sure senior leaders play the key role, right? The institution is the lengthening shadow of its leader. We heard a lot about that today. Make sure there's an open and dialogue with leaders at all levels. That's so that we can identify leaders too who might have had a bad experience with engagement elsewhere, and we can draw that out. And also so that we can sell everybody on the benefits of it. Remove the barriers to engagement, such as favoritism or perceived lack of career paths. I was thinking of IBM, which is why I'm laughing. So remove those barriers or perceived barriers, yes. So those are how we treat top employee engagement as a top priority. But then let's also provide practical knowledge and skills so that our managers know what they need to do to engage their people, so that they can become aware of the fact that they don't have to choose between engagement and finishing projects on time or managing to budgets. They can use the engagement as a lens. They look at the things they need to get done. And then finally, bring awareness to the personal benefits leaders. Continue to sell this and not just communicate it, but sell why it's important, why it makes their job easier, why it's easier to get results if you empathize and if you position the work that needs to be done through that lens. So, thank you. We really appreciate the dialogue. We would like you to fill out the evaluation on the benefits of this forum.
I'm surprised in the previous chart, if you can please go back to the previous chart.
Sure.
Before thank you. And the point that Rajkamal also mentioned, the method of engagement, the way we are going automated method and go to bots and chats and don't come to human beings, I'm surprised going forward we are not looking at that, because that is going to affect employee engagement to a very large extent.
The extent that we're, so I think are you saying that to more transparent that we're making the data? So, so to wrap up, does anybody, as you read these recommendations for going forward and as you reflect on some of the data that you saw and the conversations that you heard about today, is there one thing that you might do differently walking out of here today for your organization? Anyone?
I think for me personally, I think one key insight, though we didn't talk about it and I was reflecting on it, is also the definition the definition of a leader. That also has to undergo a change, because when you look at all of this is in the context of leader being a little bit larger than life, and our competency models, our favorite competency models, kind of standardize the leadership definition in a box.
Yes.
Which is where I think, to Pallavi's point, if Ford Motors said don't smile, many of the leaders actually even today are so hardwired to say that they have to appear a lot more serious and have the gravitas. So I think in all of this, that also needs to change, and maybe we need to reflect internally when you look at promoting leaders or talk about the role models out there, if there are certain barriers or behaviors that they are kind of portraying and people are role modeling, those are the things that we need to watch out for and kind of repurpose it.
Yeah, that's right. This does reflect on, it's not maybe just a competency model in a box, it's a leadership approach, right?
Yes.
Yeah, that was to me, when I really reflected on this, there was this moment of, wow, I don't have to choose. Maybe I have been choosing too often I've got to get this done. Maybe it really is, how do I think about my team getting it done? Think differently.
Dan, I think for me, if we look at it as our role as HR, if we look at it as custodians of culture, and what can we do, help hold managers accountable or other leaders accountable, help those leaders hold everyone else accountable for the culture that we desire or that we want to shape. And we have access to all of that. We are a party to career decisions, promotions, bring in those processes that align with the culture that we want, so that we are able to walk the talk as an organization, and our stated values on the walls become real values as perceived and seen and experienced across the organization.
Yes. Actively look for those the incongruence and the congruence in the data you have. That's great.
Yeah, so in an environment, so the learnings for me, in an environment where the customers are fairly disengaged with the companies, and that is reflected in the NPS scores that we are seeing. In an environment where the tech, as Akhil said, is really disrupting any type of engagement you're trying to do, or also in an environment where the role of bosses in a high knowledge industry like ours is absolutely getting disrupted, except for being a administrative support. Actually, the next younger people are much more intelligent and much more knowledgeable, and hence do they really need a boss that is getting questioned in the environment like a private wealth and all that. So the learning is that can we set the definition of what the manager is actually doing out there? And is there a common language in terms of engagement, at least engagement, if he is driving that, he or she is driving that in the system?
So identify that common language within your company for how managers are engaging their people. Fantastic.
So one thing that I'm thinking about is we always say, leadership is not just in your title, but it's in your job description. And I'm thinking about it being reframed around engagement as well, right? Is it part of your job description? And therefore, to all the points that everyone else has been saying, is it what you get held accountable for? Is this what we reward and recognize? Are these the behaviors versus those results, right? And how does that look tighter? I think it's just reinforcing, for me, after hearing all of this conversation, that that's a much more important agenda to push, because the numbers will come.
Yes.
That's how we're hardwired. But
That's
this
great.
is probably the piece we don't, the soft stuff is not, it's not cool.
It really is an amazing point that we really value engagement. So then shouldn't we also put that in the job description of a manager, that they are to keep their employees engaged and define what that means for us? It's an excellent point.
For me, Dan, I think so from all of us as a fraternity here, we are more human resources.
Yes.
But we have to move to human relations. First, it should start. The charity begins at home. It should start with the HR. And the more we make it simple and make it more meaningful to the employees, the engagement, and for the managers as well, it will be a beneficial thing. That's what.
So you're buying into that. We need to sell this. We need to start with ourselves and our own team.
It should be first made very simple.
Make it simple.
It should be appealing. It should be making meaning and understanding to every employee.
Yeah.
Then.
Great. Thank you.
Good discussion. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Made it very participative and everybody had a free meeting time, so it's a good format.
Thank you. And that's really what I wanted to actually once again thank everybody for coming and making it, and I hope you found it valuable and enjoyable. And we're really looking forward to your inputs, because now you're officially members of the Dale Carnegie Expert Forum, and we want you to set the agenda for us. Is how would you like this Expert Forum to take shape? What would you like us to do next? How often do you want us to engage? So we want to seek that feedback from you, and there's a sheet of paper on your table. If you could fill that up, that would really help us to take it forward and give you what you want to see. Thank you.
Thanks to Dale Carnegie team, Sanjay, Pallavi, Andreas, Dan, Gerard. Thank you very much. This is a great opportunity to interact with fellow professionals, some senior stalwarts like Akhil and many others here.
And yourself.
Thank you. We learned a lot. So it was very, very engaging, very interesting and very insightful.
This format was good. I'm not just saying for them. I think it was a little more interactive and engaging. Right word we used today. It was very engaging. So you're getting sensitive to participant engagement also, and not only employee engagement.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.